For this regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee of the Metropolitan Council for October 16th, 2023, joined by a quorum of the committee. I'm the chair, Robert Lilligren. Committee members, we have an agenda in front of us, and if there's no changes to be made, we'll consider it approved. We have an agenda. Thank you. Next is the approval of the minutes for the Community Development Committee meeting of October 2nd, 2023.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Oh, I'm doing this without my reading glasses, you guys. Let's see how long. Next we have our, so far. The two items on our consent agenda, 2023-251 and 2023-239. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember. Discussion, hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Though the consent agenda carries. Now on to the non-consent business items. The first is item 2023-252. It's the extended term and amend the project summary for the Rogers Main Street LCDA Development Grant. And we have Mr. Johnson is.
Nicole was going.
Okay, the agenda says Sam Johnson, but.
I apologize, I think that, why don't we go on to other items on the agenda, because I believe that Sam is going to be out today and Nicole is going to present, so they get in touch.
Okay. So with no objection from the committee, I'm just going to kind of move the agenda around a little to accommodate staffing here. So I'm going to move down to the parks stuff if Emmett's ready. Okay, cool. So we'll move down to our third non-consent business item, please. It's item 2023-238. It's the Regional Park System Equity Grant Program Notice of Funding Availability. And Emmett Mullin is here to present. Mr. Mullin, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Emmett Mullin, the Regional Parks Manager, and today I am here to talk about the Regional Parks and Trails System Equity Grant Program. This is the Notice of Funding Availability. Let's see, Jessica Lee, I just wanted to mention, she's here, not here today, but she will be carrying this program forward, and so that's great news for the council. The purpose of this program, the Equity Grant Program, is to provide funding to regional park implementing agencies to advance equitable use of the regional park system. The focus is on race, ethnicity, income, ability, age, and natural origin. A little program background first. This is the third time we've moved this program into implementation. We started in 2019 with a $300,000 program that was focused solely on capital projects. Our second program, we had a wider amount of money. We had $2 million, about $1.6 million of interest earnings and $600,000 of capital funds. So the good news is we've been going up. The third slide. Here are some previously funded projects. You can read these, but I'll just pick a couple. Washington County purchased a Parks on the Go van to do programming, so that was really kind of cool. And let's see what else. Ramsey County funds their cultural liaison using the Equity Grant program, which is a really important staff role. Finally, Anoka County, their communications staff have created this kind of fun virtual way to visit the parks, and that's something that they actually came to the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission and demonstrated. So it's a way to get out and use your phone to like learn about the park. So it's kind of cool. Funding for the 2024 grant round, as I mentioned, it's very similar to the last round. We have $658,000 in council bonds. That's for capital programs. And then we have $1.4 million available in park interest earnings. And this is really critical funds because it can be used for park programming and non-capital projects. Our goal is that this non-capital funding goes to funding that if so we'll prioritize funding programming. If we run out of those projects, then we have an ability to move to capital projects. Agencies may apply for multiple projects. They have a $200,000 limit for capital projects and a $200,000 limit for non-capital or programming projects for a total of $400,000 each. The scoring criteria, I know you can't really read that, maybe on your iPads, but the point I want to take away is that this criteria was adjusted a little bit based on the last round, but it worked really well during the last round. And we made a few changes based on input we got from the agencies as well as the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission. We expanded the criteria around community engagement and awareness to include awareness building among underserved communities. We also altered the criteria under programming initiatives to recognize that some park implementing agencies have lower levels of dedicated programming staff, so we just wanted to make it clear that they could compete competitively in this program. I wanted to once again thank Councilmember Vento, Wolf, and Lilligren for volunteering to be on our grant committee, so that's much appreciated. That makes it a really good, robust, I think, process. Here is our timeline for the next grant round. Here we are in the middle of October. We're looking to get the notice of funding availability out the door in early November. Mid-December, we'll have applications due for the agencies. We'll compile all that. In February, we'll convene the technical review team. They'll meet twice, once just to get the materials, and then the next time they'll come together to discuss and decide projects. April 2024, we'll bring the funding recommendations back to the council. In May, the goal is to have these grant agreements set to go out the door because we want, there's a lot of continuity. The last round was a great round. We had, again, about the same amount of funding, $2 million. A lot of those grants are ending now, and there's some continuity concerns, I know, with the agency. So we think if we can get this out the door in May 2024, those grants will sunset in June, and this will pick it up. It took a little bit more effort than the agencies anticipated, and we anticipated, to be honest. So there was a little bit more of a startup cost, particularly the staff-rich projects, but they're really moving now, and there's some exciting, I think, results. So the rationale for this recommendation is that the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, Finance Chapter 8, Strategy 4 states that equity is a consideration in the regional park system funding and investment. The Equity Grant Program is one of our key council strategies for advancing equity in the region. So with that, the recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the Regional Parks and Trail System Competitive Equity Grant Program 2024 Notice of Funding Availability. So with that, that's my presentation today. I know you've seen this before, so thank you for bearing with me. It's a good recommendation, I think, and it's exciting to see it move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mullin, for your work and your excitement around this. Will you remind me, please, in the last round, is it a fact that all 10 of our parks implementing agencies applied and received funding awards, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Great point, too. Sorry, I should have mentioned that.
Yeah, no, I just think that's great. And for the newer council members, this was a priority program. We did the pilot project in 2019. It was just the $300,000. It had to be capital. That was because of the source of the funds. And we built on work of the council that came before us. And we learned really, really quickly that to advance equity, we were going to need to have more flexible funding that could be applied to programming. And so Mr. Mullin and his team came up with this approach, and it seems to be working, so good work. Questions on the report?
I have one question.
Yeah, Councilmember Chambliss.
Multitasking here.
Right, very good.
I'm impressed.
Yes, so my question is related to the equity scoring. Emmett, is it possible for you to remind me about what changed with the scoring, if any? And if it did change, what did it change from and to?
Yeah.
And how long ago was that change?
Mr. Mullin.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, great question. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like, categories of funding, like each of the 5 categories gets 20 points, so there's 100 total points. So I think of the equity changes, like this rubric really helps us prioritize what are those high priority ones. What changed? Let me just go into that explicitly. One of our commissioners suggested that the criteria under community engagement and awareness, that include awareness building among underserved communities. So awareness building is often like signage, promotion, marketing, and that it'd be really clear that be an eligible area of funding. I wanted to mention that was Commissioner Bob Moeller who made that recommendation, and that's a common theme in terms of what he thinks is really important, that the agencies work together to promote and even market. So then the second change happened in programming initiatives. This came from Washington County staff, and recognizing that some implementing agencies don't have high levels of programming staff, and they wanted to just mention that they wanted to compete effectively with the other entities. Take, for instance, like Three Rivers Park District just has tremendous resources around programming and environmental education and skill building. And they wanted to just make the point that they really wanted to compete effectively with them and not to, privilege those agencies that have dedicated programming staff.
Okay,
Thank you.
Chair,
Thank you.
one more
Thanks.
question?
Yeah, please, Councilmember Chambliss.
So did the points change or just the contents of what was eligible?
Sorry if I didn't get to your question as quickly as you were hoping. The points did not change. They stayed exactly the same, but I think that the criteria within the categories was refined to be better. So.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. Forgive me, I walked in late, but heard most of your presentation. And I hope that I didn't miss the question I'm going to ask. There were 23 projects awarded. And you mentioned that all 10 of the implementing agencies applied. So there were multiples funded in those implementing agencies. And I'm wondering if there was a sweet spot, like 2, maybe 3, or if there were 6 in one agency and 1 or none
Yeah.
in another. I know they all won awards. They didn't all just apply. They won awards, right? It doesn't have to be exact, but
Yeah.
just from,
There were I think it was 26 grants made. I think that there were probably at least double that in the number of projects reviewed. I know that the requests far outstripped our ability to fund.
Gotcha.
you know, the message was received from you particularly that we wanted to see this money really get to the whole region. And so I think there was a real
Good
intention. And thankfully, we also had council members and MPOS commissioners, as well as implementing agency staff. They couldn't rate their own projects, but they, so there was a real desire to like see
Good
everybody.
distribution
Yeah,
across. That's
do well.
excellent to know.
So, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion on the report? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Mullin has recommended that the Metropolitan Council authorize the Regional Park System Competitive Equity Grant Program 2024 Notice of Funding Availability.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
Okay, thank you, council members. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Mullin. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thanks for stepping in there. So now we'll move up, back up to the top of the non-consent business agenda. The item one is item 2023-252. It's to extend the term and amend the project summary of Rogers Main Street LCDA Development Grant. And Mr. Johnson is here to present. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Well, I apologize for my tardiness, but it is relevant. We've had quite a wave of amendment requests from our grantees due to the fact that we are in our final year of grants that had been awarded in 2020, which of course were projects that were dealing with the effects of the pandemic. So these are projects that many of our grantees are trying to continue moving forward. And many of them, it's good news, they're able to continue these projects, but just need a little bit extra time. But it means it's quite a bit of work for us administrators, so I apologize for my tardiness.
No, we appreciate your work and thanks for the update.
Thank you so much. So I got ahead of myself here. Chair Lilligren, council members of the CDC, my name is Sam Johnson. I'm the principal grant administrator, dealing primarily with the Livable Communities grants at the council here. And I'd like to talk with you a little bit about our first grant amendment, which is the Main Street Rogers Downtown Redevelopment LCDA Development Grant. I would like you to consider approving an amendment to update the project summary as detailed in attachment B of the business item, and also to support what is generally a administrative function, which is to extend the grant a year. We allow extensions for these grants of up to 2 years as a regular staff function, but because this request came in with the scope change that needs your approval, we just decided to pack them together just for convenience sake. So just to reacquaint you with this grant, since it was approved a couple of years ago, the Main Street Rogers redevelopment is a major undertaking by the city of Rogers to remake their downtown area to be a higher density, more pedestrian-friendly area and contain more housing, along with a substantial increase in affordable housing. So we awarded the project 3 grants, an LCDA grant back in 2019 for $942,500. We also subsequently provided a grant through our LHI program of $1.5 million, and then our TBRA program of $231,400. The LCDA program grant is the one that we're considering amending here today. It supports site acquisition, site preparation, stormwater management, and placemaking for the project. The placemaking functions are public plaza and public art. And then, of course, a percentage of architectural and engineering fees related to those activities. So since 2019, the city and its developer have worked diligently through the pandemic to gather funding for the project and to acquire parcels downtown necessary to complete the development. Unfortunately, as I was alluding to earlier, City of Rogers needed to delay the project due to market instability during the pandemic. And then after things had settled down, they reported they're having difficulty acquiring just one parcel, which would have made the workforce housing components of the project possible. So while they are intending to complete the workforce housing at a future date, once they're able to acquire that parcel, because of the term limits of our grant, they're asking that we just amend the grants to focus on the senior affordable housing and the commercial and public amenities aspects of the grant. So losing the workforce housing would result in a significant decrease in the amount of affordable housing and the amount of deeply affordable units that were first proposed in the application. It would also significantly decrease the anticipated number of tax capacity increase that they had provided us as an estimate at the time of application. And they're needing to revise now because of the loss of that workforce housing aspect of the development. So just to get you a precise breakdown of what those changes look like, the large reduction in housing units, particularly the affordable housing, constitutes a significant change for the project that requires your approval. So without the workforce housing, the total amount of units decreases by over 60% for the entire project. However, they were able to preserve the deeply affordable units. So you'll see that the units that are under 30% AMI only decreased by 2, and they actually were able to increase the amount of units that are between 31 and 50% by 10. So that goes from 30 to 40. Again, the anticipated net tax capacity decreases quite a bit because of the loss of that workforce housing. So you'll see that originally they anticipated 165,000 increase in that capacity, and now it's just up to 35,000. Just to be completely transparent, this extension is usually an administrative decision, but because the scope that they're looking to amend the project to cover would require that extra year, we just tied them in together. So when staff looked at this, they do two things. First thing they do is they rescore the project as it was scored originally in the 2019 round. So they're using the criteria from 2019 to decide if the score of the project would have been such that they could have recommended it. But in addition to that, because there are many other applicants during that round that may not have received funding, they compare that score to that of the other applicants to decide if it would have bumped it down the list insofar as another applicant that would have received funding missed out because of the changes, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we reviewed it for both of those criteria. We looked at the project as it's articulated now and believe that it would have still been competitive in the funding round. It's still providing great public benefits to the city of Roger, great demonstration of increased density in a suburban town that puts affordable housing in a place that is much more pedestrian friendly and can be a really nice amenity and a showcase for the city of Roger to revitalize their downtown. So therefore, staff here at the council are asking you to approve this amendment to update the project summary as detailed in attachment B of the business item, and then also to support our extending the grants 1 year so that they can finish this project as they originally had foreseen.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And I appreciate you expanding a little on the scoring and going back to the 2019 criteria, and this wasn't displacing another project that would have received scoring. That's very helpful. Discussion on the report, Councilmember Chambliss.
I just think this is a really good project, and it really shows the level of dedication and persistence by the city of Rogers to, kind of overcome the issues that we had with the pandemic and still try to make it work and still provide affordable housing. So I think it's great, and, I definitely intend to approve the request.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So since some of this money, or probably most of this money, was for site acquisition and they didn't acquire one of the sites, how much more money is going into what other activities?
Well, they didn't, Chair Lilligren, Councilperson Wolf, they simply put forward that they were unable to acquire this final parcel. So this was one of several parcels on the site. And it would have been more difficult for them if they were proposing to us changes to the budget as well. They simply kind of came to us and said, this is where we're at right now. And this is what we're intending to complete with the project. What do you recommend? And staff did not recommend prorating that site acquisition total to accommodate the parcel that is yet to be acquired. They simply looked at the project as they were proposing and then scoring it as such and seeing if it was still been competitive. So if in scoring the projects, they would have deemed that they had to reduce the award, we would have come to you with that recommendation, but because of the affordable housing and the amenities that they're continuing to provide, staff felt comfortable maintaining the level of award that they originally put forward.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That didn't answer the question. The question was, since they didn't use some of that money on site acquisition because they couldn't acquire a site, what are they spending it on?
Mr. Johnson.
Chair Lilligren, Councilmember Wolf. To put it a little bit more succinctly, because there are several parcels that they were acquiring for this project, and the cost of all those parcels goes well beyond what we had given them to fund those acquisitions. It wasn't that the amount of acquisition would have covered 7 parcels, say, and since they only purchased 6, you know, they're going to give us back some of that money. We only funded a portion of that acquisition. And so because the project is so much larger than what we had put money in to support, we weren't doing a one-to-one prorated analysis of whether or not they would continue receiving that amount of funding. We just thought, you know, we're just a small sliver of that project cost, and we still support the larger deliverables of the project and believe that the amount of award is deserved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or discussion? Yeah, Councilmember Carter.
Just also appreciate the tenacity to continue moving forward with this project and the fact that a good percentage of the highly affordable units were kept as a part of the project, and we still have the leveraging of private funds also against the public funds. Indeed, it looks like they would have paid for a lot more of the workforce, and thus, you know, the greater dollar amount, of course, in the beginning. But thank you so much for bringing this back to us. We need this housing, and particularly that affordable housing that it will be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Chambliss.
Chair, I don't know if any other council members had further questions or discussions, but if not, then I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
And it's been seconded, so it's before us. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Good work. I just want to add my thanks to staying with this, right, for you and for the city of Rogers as well. So, seeing no further discussion on the motion, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. And Mr. Johnson, you're here for the next item, which is 2023-253. It's to extend the term and amend the budget to expand the scope of Jema River LCA pre-development grant. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you so much, Chair Lilligren. So this one is a bit of good news, but still needs your approval. So I'm before you to recommend from the staff that we shift funds from a few budget line items that we had originally awarded this project to other eligible activities within the pre-dev LCA program. So just a little bit of background for the Jema River project. This was a property that was a fully leased building of local, primarily BIPOC businesses on Lake Street in Minneapolis before it was destroyed in the 2020 unrest. The property owner managed the fully leased building since 2014 and retained support from many previous tenants who are interested in returning to the reconstructed building if it is built. The city of Minneapolis, as our grantee, is supporting this developer in exploring the restoration of the building, which would return local jobs to a block of Lake Street that's known to be a vibrant commercial hub in a diverse community. And the property owner is also exploring putting new affordable housing on top of the restored commercial building on Lake Street here. So the grant funds, when they originally awarded aspects necessary to pre-development work related to reconstruction of the building, including a feasibility study, site plans, and public realm plans. And then also because the property owner is not an experienced developer, we awarded a significant amount of funding for developer mentoring in order to help them rebuild the building. So due to the circumstances of building demise in the 2020 unrest, and also the relative inexperience of the property owner turned developer, mentorship services were provided not just by us, but by the city of Minneapolis as well. And through those services, the developer was able to secure other grant funds through the Lake Street Council and also through Hennepin County. Unfortunately, Lake Street Council and Hennepin County grants have quite a bit of overlap with the funds that we provided for this development. And so the city of Minneapolis, in order to streamline these funding sources and just trying to make sense of them for the developer, is coming back to us, reporting both that the site plan, public realm plans that we had funded are complete, and also that the feasibility study that we funded is complete. But they're asking that we instead take the funds that we had awarded for those two activities and move it to architectural design for the affordable housing, which is another eligible pre-development grant activity, so that they can just help this developer maximize the funds that it had received for the project. So when asking us to move these funds between grant activities, that did cause a shift to be over 33%, and we are required to come before you for anything that goes over 20%. This is just to make sure that whenever these shifts of this significance happen, making sure that what the developer and the grantee have promised still happens. But also, because they're asking us to fund a new activity, the architectural fees for the affordable housing, we're considering it a scope expansion of the project. So we're recognizing that we're not only getting the feasibility study and the site plans, public realm plans, but we are also given an opportunity to help this project with its architectural fees as well, which would really give it a long way towards actually moving from pre-development into developing this property. So we looked at the proposal, and we did the same process, rescored it, looked at the other applicants, and really because we're getting even more from the developer with these grant funds, it was kind of an easy recommendation. And so we're coming before you just to be clear that while these site plans and public realm plans, the financial feasibility are not being paid directly with our funds, they're still being completed. And we're also going to be helping out with architectural design for this building as well, and hoping that you'll approve that scope expansion for this project. One last thing, because again, this is a phase of the plan that is moving into the development. They're asking that we extend the grant by a year so that they can complete those architectural renderings and work with the developer to be able to complete that part of the process, which of course is beyond the 2-year term of our LCDA pre-dev grants. So therefore, we're just asking Mr. Chair, council members of the CDC, that you approve amending this project to shift funds from the site plans and public realm plans, and also from the financial feasibility study budget line items to a new affordable housing architectural design budget line item, and also allow some, extend this grant 1 year to June 30th, 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Discussion on that report, Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. I do see that the extension is needed in time, but it also appears that we're getting more bang for our buck. And although I cannot point to the exact strategic item, I know that this advances equitable development, and I see that in words in our 2040 plan. And so I am very, very much in favor of moving this. I cannot see any reason we would be adverse to doing so. And I will be making the motion to move it. So moved. I hope
Thank you,
there's in favor.
Councilmember. Yeah, is there a second? Great, thank you. Discussion on the motion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious if there's any lessons learned about the duplication of these funds, the Hennepin County funds, the Lake Street funds, and our funds. It doesn't seem like that happens a lot, based on my 4 years here, but is there a way to avoid that, I guess, moving forward? First of all, I'm glad that all these fund sources exist. But I suspect we work pretty closely with our county partners and other sources of funding to make sure that it doesn't. Maybe this is just a one-off kind of a thing, or maybe not.
Mr. Johnson.
Chair Lilligren, Councilmember Lindstrom, that is a great observation. What I could speculate is that we don't have any control over other grant or other funding sources that these projects pursue in order to make them reality. What we do ask is that when there are changes, they let us know the circumstances behind them. And when City of Minneapolis was in discussion with us about this particular change, they simply said that this was a product of these new mentoring efforts. So a lot of these developers, especially if they're inexperienced, aren't aware of the fund sources that are available through public sources. And so this was really just pointing to the success of the mentoring program. And we do have a deliverable tied to that aspect of our grant in which they report how the mentoring went. And in that report, I think we're going to be gathering more data on how we can better make sure that as we are doing a better job working with other public funders, that we don't bump elbows too much.
Right on.
Thank you, and thanks. I was going to ask you a little more about the mentoring, and you kind of touched on what I was going to ask about, and I just find that very interesting and really supportive of emerging developers and building diversity amongst the property owners and developers in this area, which is I used to live right around the corner from this for 36 years, and it's a very international kind of area, a lot of new arrivals, communities there. So I just think this is a win all around. Well, further discussion on the motion, Councilmember Bento.
This is not an important question, but I'm curious. Jema River, I've never heard of that. And I'm wondering if anyone can tell us where the name comes from?
Mr. Johnson?
Chair Lilligren, Councilmember Bento, I apologize. I'm not sure the
Okay.
circumstances.
You don't need to apologize. It's a bizarre question, but.
No one Googling it, so. It actually doesn't come up. So, yeah, I don't know. All right. Anyone else? Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much.
so much.
Yeah. And we'll move to our fourth and final non-consent business item. It's item 2023-254. It's submittal of our PRO housing application to HUD. And Ms. Berkey's here to present. This is our breakneck speed application, right? Yeah.
That's correct.
Ms.
Hello,
Berkey.
Chair Lilligren and committee members. I'm Sarah Berkey, Senior Manager for Housing Policy and Livable Communities. And yes, we're here today with an update and asking for your recommendation to move forward on the pro-housing opportunity with HUD. So as we described at a recent meeting, because this has been going very quickly, it wasn't very long ago, this is a brand new opportunity through HUD called Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing, and it's designed to empower communities that are actively taking steps to remove barriers to affordable housing, seeking to increase housing production and lower housing costs for families over the long term. And we are able to apply as the designated Metropolitan Planning Organization for our region. And cities and counties are also eligible to apply, as well as states, I believe. So we have put out some requests and kind of gathered interest from a number of different municipalities and counties in our region, with a focus on Hennepin County and Ramsey County, because those two counties are priorities in HUD's set of rules and priorities for this particular funding opportunity. And together, we developed a $10 million pro-housing grant request that would, between 2024 and 2029, support policy and planning, direct grants, and new development of 30% AMI housing throughout the region. And though Hennepin and Ramsey would be direct subrecipients of the award under our proposal, funding and support would also be available to communities throughout the entire 7-county metropolitan region by having Metropolitan Council serve as the applicant for this award. So we see this as a real opportunity to build on a lot of progress that's already been made in our region, to go broader and deeper with new kind of unprecedented levels of revenues coming in to support housing, a lot of ongoing attention to housing policy and in terms of regional and local planning efforts that feels new and feels like something that has momentum, and a lot of zoning and land use policies that have already been put into place in our region, especially with Thrive 2040 and kind of the regional development that's happened over the last several years. We're starting to build a lot of momentum, and we'd like to make sure that that momentum extends to every community in our region. So this is a good opportunity to support that. The HUD grant process asks for leverage funds. They're not a match, a direct match in kind of federal terms, but it is a leverage commitment that we can use to get more points and better consideration of our grant proposal. We have the existing legislative obligation to make at least $1.5 million in grants each year for the next several years for the Local Housing Incentives Account program. And we believe that these activities are already very well aligned with the pro-housing goals. And so if we were able to use those funds as leverage, we would be able to report on the impact of that grant program along with the impact of the pro-housing grant that we might receive from HUD and show that these funds are being used as leverage. To get the maximum points, we need to show leverage of about 50% of our grants, so $5 million is the most we need to commit as leverage. And just to make it a round number with 4 years of upcoming grant-making activity, staff were recommending that we commit $6 million in leverage for the next 4 years of the LHIA grant program as part of our application. The timeline for this opportunity is moving quickly. As you'll recall, we opened public comment on the grant application on the 26th of September. It was open for a total of 15 days, closed at the end of the day on October 10th. And in that time period, we also held a public hearing at this committee meeting on the 2nd. We did not receive any formal public comments through any of those venues or channels. Although we do have a number of letters of support that are already in our draft grant application for your review from Hennepin and Ramsey counties, as well as 5 cities throughout the metro area. And we've also had a number of informal conversations with communities throughout the region, stating support and gratitude that we were able to pull together an application that those communities could in the future benefit from. So with your support today, we would ask for a recommendation to submit the grant and then ask the full council to endorse that recommendation and submit the application by its due date on the 30th of October. So today, the proposed action for you all to consider is for the Metropolitan Council to authorize the Executive Director of the Community Development Division to submit the grant application to HUD for the pro-housing program, and also to commit the $6 million in local housing incentive account grants over the years 2024 through 2028 as the leverage for the pro-housing grant if awarded.
Thank you, Ms. Berkey. Just on the, I have a quick question on the leveraged funds, and I think I understood you correctly. And so the $6 million that you identified as leveraged funds, those are local housing incentive account funds that we're statutorily obligated to direct towards similar priorities, right? So that's already kind of baked in there.
Yes.
Thank you, thanks. That's what I thought I heard. Discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up on that, is there anything we would have to do differently with the LHIA money because it's called leverage?
Ms. Berkey?
Yeah, Chair Lilligren, Councilmember Wolf, I don't believe there's anything we would need to do differently. It's consistent with the goals of the pro-housing program to offer these grants, and we would simply be able to leverage that ongoing effort here at the council to meet those requirements.
And I think Director Barajas wants to follow up.
And I would just add, thank you, Mr. Chair, that we did check in with our legal counsel too, to be sure, like, right? Is there anything else that layers onto this? Is there any conflict that we should be aware of, or anything that comes around that becomes required later? And they did review and share, like, nope, that sounds like this is just a leverage that we can offer. So we were asking that question very specifically. Thank you.
Thanks for the thoroughness of your work. Further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
I'm just curious if it's a year from now, 2 years from now, you look back and think about the $10 million that we hopefully get in these 2 counties and 2.5 for us. What are some of the things that you have in your head that you are envisioning will be accomplished to call this a success?
Yeah, and we would have a little more time than that, Chair Lilligren and Councilmember Lindstrom, luckily. The term of the grant would fund activities through the year 2029, and so this would allow several years of concerted effort. But what we really hope to see is, cities adopting policies and implementing programs in our region that allow them to make the most possible impact with the sort of unprecedented public resources that are flowing into housing right now, that we're able to really supercharge a lot of the efforts we would do anyway around the implementation of Imagine 2050 and the housing policy plan we're developing now. This will be really well timed to support that work, and we should be able to offer kind of more direct assistance, much deeper assistance to communities who are interested in doing more on housing but may not have the staff capacity available within their own teams at this point to do that well. And we hope that by playing this regional role that there'll be kind of just overall better coordination of all those efforts in our region, and we'll have the opportunity to work closely with our partners at counties and cities and work towards some common goals together, and that will provide a useful structure as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that we were able to pull this together so quickly and see where we plan to go in terms of the timeline. I know that HUD probably kind of did a blast to all the city's community development departments and those that don't have a full community development, their communications department, and that I believe 5 cities supported this project through resolutions. Can you list what cities those were?
Sure.
Ms. Berkey.
Yeah, Chair Lilligren and Councilmember Chambliss, we received, I don't know that it's formal resolutions of support, but we received formal letters of support from, I just wrote it down, Brooklyn Park, Richfield, Edina, Bloomington, and I think there was one more. I'm sorry.
Hopkins.
Hopkins, thank you. And also had a lot of conversations along the way with cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis. And we would welcome additional letters of support if anyone is listening in and wants to provide one before we submit the application to HUD.
There's still time.
Chair, yes.
From Chambliss.
Sarah, this is good to see that. I noticed that 3 of the cities, Brooklyn Park, Richfield, and Bloomington, have traditionally been areas of concentrated poverty. And I know they probably have been challenged with finding affordable housing in those areas, as well as some of the other areas that we've worked with, like Richfield and Bloomington and Hopkins. So, yeah, I hope other people will formally support and also hear about this as we roll this program out, and hopefully we do get the application approved and we can go forward.
Thank you. Councilmember, any further discussion? Councilmember Bento.
I'd like to move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thanks, Ms. Berkey, for you and your team for all the work, and we'll see this at the next council meeting. That dispenses with our business items on our agenda for tonight, so we have two information items. The first is the Metropolitan Housing Opportunities Program unit transfer from Minneapolis Public Housing Authority to the Metropolitan Council and Redevelopment Authority. The Metropolitan Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And Ms. Smith is here to present, and Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Terry Smith. As you know, I'm the Director of the Council's Housing and Redevelopment Authority. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Dominic Mitchell. Dominic is the Deputy Director at Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. So we thought it would be beneficial for you to hear from our colleagues in Minneapolis on this sort of joint initiative that we're working on together.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Mitchell.
He'll tell you a little bit about himself when he takes
Great.
on a few of the slides, but we're here to talk about the Metropolitan Housing Opportunities Program, we call MHOP. There's a lot of Metropolitan in there, but it's about potential housing unit conversion to certain suburban units in cooperation with Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. I was before you back in June with an information item on this same topic, you may recall. And there were some concerns expressed about long-term unit affordability after conversion. So we went back to the drawing board and made some changes and have some new information to share with you today. And so really the purpose of today is information to hopefully set this up for some future action items, which we'll talk about today. I also want to welcome Rachel Ulmberg, who is in the audience with us today. She's been working deeply on this at MPHA, and so she's the Assistant Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives. And so if there are technical questions that Dominic and I can't answer, Rachel will be our gal here in the audience. So thank you for being here. And I'm going to pass it to Dominic for the first few slides.
Thank you, Chair and committee members, for inviting me today. I want to just acknowledge, too, Director Smith. Prior to being at MPHA, I started this role in March, and I was right here in St. Paul at the housing agency running our Housing Choice Voucher Program, right alongside Director Smith. And I just really want to acknowledge and thank the council. This is my first time, and I know everyone's not here, but this is my first time in front of the council. And what we always experienced in St. Paul, and what we certainly experienced in Minneapolis, is just how good of a job the council does at elevating the region's interests and partnering with other organizations to do that. And I think this is really an example of that work. We always have a very willing partner in Director Smith and the HRA and the Met Council. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Metropolitan Housing Opportunities Program, just a little bit of an overview. Please go easy on me. I'll repeat, I've only been in Minneapolis since March. It's more complicated than it really needs to be as a program, and that's part of why we're here. Ultimately, we don't think it's a tool that's serving our owner partners or our participating residents as well as it probably could, which is why we're seeking to convert this into a more usable product for the region. It was initiated in 1998 as a part of the Holman Consent Decree. That consent decree essentially we had a very large housing project in Minneapolis. It required the destruction of that project and essentially the rehousing of all those opportunities throughout the region. We did some of that directly in Minneapolis, but a lot of those units were placed in the suburban metro. And it was actually contemplated originally that someday something like this might happen, and the Metropolitan Housing and Redevelopment Authority would be at the table again for a conversion of these types. But the idea then, as the idea is now, was to integrate low-income families into the communities throughout the region, kind of what we talk about when we say meaningful choice. An interesting anecdote, as a part of this Holman decree, the council developed 150 units of housing known as the Family Affordable Housing Program. And I know even in St. Paul, we had some vouchers as a part of the Holman Consent Decree right alongside the river here that we used for project basing. So just another taste of how this really was a region-wide effort. So at its most kind of high level, what is really not working with the Metropolitan Housing Opportunities Program is that these are public housing units in mixed income developments. We have 106 of them, and there's a little bit more detail in the later slides about where those units are, but they are kind of scattered throughout the region. And so while Minneapolis Public Housing Authority carries them as a part of our contract with HUD, and we are essentially responsible for all the quality of the units and the qualities of the applications and the occupancy of those units, these are owners with their own business models trying to operate market rate and Section 8 units alongside these public housing units. The other issue is that if the participant is wanting to move out of one of these units, that's the end of the line for them as far as an ongoing rental assistance subsidy goes. Because of course with public housing, when you decide to move out of your public housing, there isn't necessarily an option for continued assistance. And so that's kind of, those are the two major defects of this model. And again, it wasn't originally contemplated, I think, to last forever. And what we have found, which I'll get into in a little bit, is that HUD has kind of created a little bit more sophisticated tools for these kinds of housing products. The owners that we work with in administering these products are owners that we are familiar with in operating the voucher program. You have Project for Pride in Living, you have Common Bond, and so they are operating HCV Section 8 units, sometimes some project-based units, and then a public housing unit on side of those things. So they have the very tall order. We don't have an advocate for an owner here today, but they do have the tall order, we think, of having to kind of keep track of those requirements for all those separate programs. And really what they're trying to do is ensure consistent service and property management for all of their residents there. And you could see by the listing of the jurisdictions here, kind of where these units are. And the top bullets, except for the bottom two, are all in the Metro Housing and Redevelopment Authority's jurisdiction. And then Minneapolis, we have one project there. And Plymouth, there's another, I think, 2 projects there. And then you see kind of the total units in the development where the public housing is located alongside that initial number. And so this just kind of shows, I think, a little bit of the scope, how really Holman was really trying to spread out these housing opportunities, and you could see that they did that here. So Director Smith talked a little bit about this, but there was, we formally requested Metro's partnership. And this has been an ongoing conversation, I understand. It preceded my arrival at the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. And this time, what we really intended to do was to, what this first bullet says, memorialize the commitment to uphold unit long-term affordability. I think what we saw happen was that the tools that HUD had in place didn't necessarily do that for us, but they've really developed their tools since then, I think, to assist all housing authorities with this kind of option. And we believe this will be kind of an effective solution. Through this partnership, we hope to do all of these things listed here. Of course, prevent displacement of residents, that's really priority 1. Increasing resident choice, as I said, the ultimate conversion of this would mean that there would be a Section 8 product. And so there would be an element of choice that when residents wanted to move, they would have a voucher that they could move with. And then really, as I talked a little bit about ease of administration to allow for more effective property management on the owner side. A footnote here is, of course, it would ease administration for the agency involved too, whether it's Metro or MPHA. But really the goal is to kind of bring maximum opportunity to the residents served and to not make it such a burdensome process for the owners that we're partnering with in providing this assistance. So at its highest level, this conversion is a 2-step process. We have more detailed slides on this after. But we lay them out here. There's a Public and Indian Housing, PIH notice that guides us kind of on the steps. But as you might imagine, there are a lot of pages to that notice and a lot more details in this process. However, at its broadest level, this will be kind of a voluntary disposition from MPHA to Metro HRA of these units While those units are waiting to be converted to a Section 8 product, we would enter into a joint powers agreement where MPHA would continue administering them as public housing until the streamlined voluntary conversion is ultimately approved. What MPHA would also be doing is essentially funding the work around the streamlined voluntary conversion. We recognize that taking on additional units and vouchers at this many sites is work for Metro HRA staff, and so we are really seeking to make this as easy as possible by essentially funding the consultant's work, and of course, continue to be at the table for all of those resident conversations and the owner conversations as well. But you see a little more details on the streamlined voluntary conversion after this, and I think what Director Smith will get to in a little bit more detail is that the main way to preserve long-term affordability is to really project-base this resource. So it's 20-year contracts, renewable for another 20 years at each of these developments. With that, I will turn it over to Director Smith.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. So in terms of steps to get through this streamlined voluntary conversion pathway, and some of these items will require council approval, and so the items with the double asterisk here will require your approval and the approval of the full council at some point before this happens. The goal date for this conversion is June 2024, so we have some time to work through it, but we also know a lot of these steps take some time. So first, like beginning very soon, will be engagement with residents and owners on the conversion process. But ultimately, the residents that occupy these units have a say in whether this goes through, because it's their home that's being impacted and they need to agree to this plan before HUD will approve it. And I think we're confident and have had enough conversations, and we went through this with our own units with the Family Affordable Housing Program back in 2010, sort of a similar process. And it really is a benefit to the residents because at the end of the day, they could get a voucher to move to a unit of their choice, or they could remain in the unit as project-based housing. So it opens up opportunities for a resident that they currently don't have under public housing. It would require the second box there, Metro HRA, to revise its public housing agency plan to add the conversion action. So this is the plan that was just approved last Wednesday by the council that Stephanie has recently been before you on, but the conversion is considered a significant amendment. So it requires a revision of the plan and then a public hearing. So we would be back before you at a future action with a public hearing date. We would submit an application to HUD to voluntarily transfer those 106 units from Minneapolis to Metro HRA, and HUD would have to approve that. I think important to point out, but I think Dominic mentioned it too, but we've had numerous conversations with HUD, and we've been talking with Minneapolis about this for, I think, 20 years. So, I mean, it's just really that the tools have become more sophisticated. This streamlined voluntary pathway is a fairly new HUD rule, and so it hasn't been around that long, and so it's been a long time, but I think, the council, we didn't have the infrastructure in place to operate public housing, and we got rid of public housing for a reason. It's underfunded, it's overregulated, and for the same reason these units don't work. So part of the fourth box there is to enter into a joint powers agreement with MPHA, so MPHA is able to continue operating these units while they remain public housing. They'll continue to collect the rent, do the maintenance, collect the subsidy, et cetera, until the date of the conversion. We've been working with the internal, with both of our legal teams, both the council's legal team and MPHA's legal team, and we have a joint powers agreement drafted with our councils. The fifth step here would be that Metro HRA submits a streamlined voluntary conversion plan, an application to HUD, and that's developed in partnership with the consultant that MPHA hired, and we've been working in this partnership with the consultant maybe since the beginning of the year, something like that. But we're on our way to getting that completed. Once approved, we would apply for the 106 tenant protection vouchers to keep the assistance for the residents that are occupying their units, so they remain with rental assistance. And that's really part of the conversion process, is these tenant protection vouchers. And our conversion plan is if we don't get the tenant protection vouchers, we don't do this. And so we will get the vouchers from HUD. They have money in their federal budget every year for these purposes, and it's part of a standard part of the conversion process. Once we get the 106 vouchers from HUD, we will transfer the 8 units back to Minneapolis, the 19 units back to Plymouth, and then we would project base the remaining vouchers that are in our jurisdiction, which is 79. So they would create long-term affordability. Again, we would have 20-year contracts with those owners for the project-based vouchers. And I think another point to consider is that these units, these 106 units are currently under a declaration of trust, which requires long-term affordability, and that's a HUD requirement. Those declarations of trust expire varying dates in 2035. So at that point, the owners would be able to do whatever they wanted with those units, which could include going market rate. So really, from a long-term perspective, the project-based option is even a better option going forward to ensure there's long-term unit affordability with these units. I should also mention that of the, I think that I have that on the next slide. So of the projects that we have, there are 16 projects in this MHOP portfolio. 13 of them are in Metro HRA's jurisdiction. And with 12 of them, we have existing relationships with the owner. So we either have a project-based contract already with that owner, or we have housing choice voucher holders living in that property. So we're familiar with these owners. The Metro HRA, again, we would receive an additional, actually that should say 106. We went back and forth. 79 is the units that would remain with us, but we will request 106 tenant protection vouchers. And then those would be sent back to Minneapolis and Plymouth for the units that are in those locations. Again, a 20-year project-based voucher contract. And then just reiterating that the vouchers are more flexible for the residents that live there, because with public housing, the resident is assisted as long as they live in that unit. As soon as they move, they're no longer assisted. So they don't have the ability to get a voucher now. But with the with converting them to project-based vouchers after 1 year, they will be able to get a tenant-based voucher to move to a location of their choice. And in fact, in the beginning, right during the conversion process, residents have a choice right off the bat whether they want to remain in their current unit or move. So they get that choice right off the bat, whether to remain in place or move to a location of their choice. And then there's increased unit rent for unit operation. So there's streamlined administration for the owners, but there's more rent. So public housing is underfunded. These owners are getting $296 a month per unit in subsidy, and then whatever the tenant rent is, which the average is, I think it was $430. And so they're getting, $7 something a month to operate these units, which is well below what market rent is, and they would get a higher rent as, project-based vouchers that would be funded by the voucher program. So I think it's really the best option for all parties. As Dominic indicated, this arrangement was never meant to be long-term, and it makes sense that we operate the units as the council because they're in our jurisdiction. It's the owner would be dealing with one housing authority instead of two. And so it just makes the most sense for all parties. And so that's really our presentation and some of the high points, and we're happy to answer any questions you have on this.
Yeah, thank you. This is amazing. I mean, it's like, even from sitting up here, you can see how complicated putting something like this together is. So I have requesting to speak Councilmember Wolf, Councilmember Chambas, and Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you,
Councilmember
Mr.
Wolf.
Chair.
Yeah.
Obviously, Minneapolis is in support of this plan. I just wanted to double check that Plymouth is as well.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Wolf, we've been engaged with Plymouth on numerous occasions. They've recently had a turnover in staff, well, actually 2 staff members. And so we're engaging with the new community development director. And so they are supportive of this. I think one of the things they would like, and this is from the previous director that worked there, but they would like to have the vouchers to administer in their own service area because they get more funding. If they have 19 more vouchers in their service area, they get the HUD funding, administrative fees for operating those vouchers. And from our perspective, I think it's in our best interest to send those files back to Plymouth for operating. So that was their main concern. But they understand that the barriers that are in place for the owners, the tenants, and the agencies that are operating these units. So they have also been supportive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I was here in 2010 when we converted our units, and I don't think the price differential was quite that terrible. Yes. But If it's obviously getting worse over time, the sooner we can do this, the better, because we don't want to make it horrible for the landlords to have these units.
Thanks for that history. Councilmember Chambliss.
I think in a way that my question ties, or my comments tie to what Councilmember Wolf said. I'm glad that we're doing this now. I hope that if something like this has to happen in the future, we don't have to wait so long to address it, and we can have the lessons learned. I remember when this happened, I didn't know anything about the Holman Decree or what it was. I just knew that friends and family members, including my grandmother, were impacted. I lived in the city of Brooklyn Park, where suddenly all these folks were in Brooklyn Park, and they didn't have access to resources, transportation, jobs. Their cultural assets were gone. So those are some of the things I think that we can learn lessons from. But I am glad that we're going to be able to convert these and still offer opportunity for the residents. There were a lot of folks, I think, that fell through the cracks. And, they may have gotten a voucher, they may have gotten an apartment, and then what? We only have, relatively few vouchers involved in this program, with, thousands and thousands of people on the Section 8 waiting list. Even with that, I'm very happy that we have a visible partnership with Minneapolis, with your presence here today. And I hope that we continue to have those kind of partnerships and have you come and visit more often.
Thank you. Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
I saw Terry slip you $20 when you were giving the kudos. You're welcome back anytime. A couple of things. First of all, it seems the setup, when this was put in place, seems unusual to have public housing in the private sector, to like wedge 3 units into a unit, into an apartment complex of 30 units. And like you said, Minneapolis is responsible for the upkeep, but it's in a private development. So there must be some challenges there. I just want to make it crystal clear. So since these are new vouchers, it doesn't have any impact on folks that are on the waiting list currently. Is that a correct statement to make?
Ms. Smith.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Lindstrom, that's correct. The vouchers that we get will go to the residents that are occupying the units today to keep their rent affordable. And one thing I forgot to mention, Mr. Chair, is because these are part of a federal conversion action, we've had lots of conversations around project-based vouchers lately. These units do not count towards our current 20% policy cap of project-based. So converted units are excluded from that cap.
Good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Councilmember Lindstrom?
Oh, good answer, thanks.
That's the question.
Further discussion
Want to ask.
on this report? All right, seeing none, I appreciate your being here, Dominic and Terry. Thanks for this, and thanks for all the work. I just can't imagine what went into this. And I was on the Minneapolis City Council, and we were governing under the Holman Decree, and it's just interesting to watch this evolution here. And I would note it's not very much fun governing under federal decree. So thank you. And we will move on to our final information item for the evening. It is the administrative process for minor long-range plan amendments. And Mr. Mullin and Ms. Kinney, welcome.
Thanks, Chair Lilligren and council members. We are back. Today, as you said, we are here to talk about the regional administrative process for minor routine long-range plan amendments. Tracy Kinney, my colleague, and I were here about a year ago with sort of early proposal to explore this. We really have dug into this, and we're really looking forward to talking with you today about it. I wanted to mention that this is a similar process that Angela Torres and the local planning assistance folks have with the comprehensive plan administrative amendments, that certain administrative or of comp plan amendments would, you know, they have a similar process to this, excuse me. This presentation will take about 10 minutes, especially if I keep moving. So let's go to the second slide. Our proposal is to develop an administrative review process that would authorize the executive director of community development or her designee to administratively review certain minor amendments for park and trail long-range plans that meet very specific administrative process criteria. We think that there are a number of benefits to this proposal. First, we think it will save agency staff time preparing traditional plan amendments for very minor requests. We also think this will help reduce committee review time for minor amendments. Finally, we hope that this will result in park and trail plans that are updated more frequently and better reflect future direction. So the plan amendments, in assembling this proposal, Tracy particularly, and I went through park and trail plan amendments over the past 5 years. And we looked at them and we found that nearly 25% of all plan amendments could be characterized as minor or routine. And so that's how we sort of compiled the criteria included in this proposal. I also wanted to mention that council staff are also anticipating a number of minor amendments are going to emerge as part of this GIS, that's Geographic Information System, improvement projects. This is something that we're working through with the agencies now, and we think that this could be a really good tool to bundle needed simple corrections and adjustments. So, oops, that's you. Is that you or me, Tracy?
That's me.
Oh, good. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Emmett, Chair, council members, good afternoon. So before you is a suite of amendments, both existing and proposed. And these are a range of amendments that describe an effort to match the scale of the request to a similar scaled process while always ensuring consistency with council policies and procedures. First, let's start with the proposed administrative amendment process. For certain minor amendments, these proposals would need to meet certain council-approved criteria to qualify for consideration for this process. These amendments would have an expedited administrative review by council clerk staff and the council's community development director, as Emmett mentioned, or her designee. I'll talk about the draft criteria in the next slide. For the requests that don't meet the administrative process criteria but are still minor and focused in nature, there is the proposed minor long-range plan amendment. We've been operating with this for a while, so we would like to codify that. This amendment process has also an abbreviated plan requirement process for council committee review. We will delve into this process deeper as we discuss the Imagine 2050 and policy plan, policy area update. Next is the current full amendment process. This full amendment process is for council committee review of significant changes. It includes proposals that meet all of the plan requirements for a particular park and trail, for a particular park or trail unit. And lastly, the policy plan update amendments. These amendments are system level changes that occur with a public hearing. These changes could include major boundary adjustments or trail extensions, to name a few. We will also be talking about this during the Imagine 2050 process. So, before you is the draft administrative process criteria for your consideration. We heard your advice in October of 2022, and we are back, as well as MPOS's advice from the October meeting. The amendment proposals would need to meet this criteria to qualify for the administrative amendment process. This criteria was developed from the last 5 years of amendments, as well as the anticipated amendments as part of the council-led GIS improvement project. So these are tables 1 and 2 of your business item, and they outline the request as well as the acreage information. Now I'm going to describe the criteria. So in all cases, the proposed amendment conforms to regional system plans and is consistent with council policies and plans. And plan amendments that do not, and these are plan amendments that do not change the acquisition and/or development concept of the long-range plan. So the remaining 4 categories describes the types of minor and routine amendments that would be considered for the administrative process. This includes corrections, trail implementation, boundary adjustments, and council consents to easements. Let's start with corrections. This includes corrections to a minor mapping or design error that does not have material impact on planned park or trail boundaries. Next, trail implementation. This includes regional trail implementation that alters the alignment but does not alter the start or end points. These are trail realignments that move the trail to a different road, not trail alignment clarifications that change the alignments to the opposite side of the road. So it's not that minor. Next, boundary adjustments. This includes boundary adjustments, public-to-public land exchanges, or acquisition long-range plan amendments that change the administrative boundary by less than 5 acres or 2% of the unit's total acreage, whichever is more, and land additions or removals that are less than $100,000 in cost. We heard advice from the implementing agencies that this threshold of $100,000 is too low. They would like to see a higher threshold that is commensurate with real estate prices. Later in the presentation, I will discuss the advice that we heard from the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Committee from their October meeting. And lastly, let's talk about council consents to easements. This includes land and/or easement conveyances for natural area monitoring, restoration or enhancement projects, or in underground utility improvements that do not have material impact on the above-ground recreational opportunities, natural areas, or cultural resources. I'll end on the note that while an amendment may fall into one of the above categories, the council may determine that there are substantial effects related to the proposed amendment that require the review of the advisory committees and the governing body of the council. Now let's talk about some examples. So here are some examples of some possible candidates for the administrative amendment process. These are small acreage and really focused topics for these amendments. So the first example on the left is a recent design correction. After it was approved by the council, a small correction of a 0.09 acre or less than 1% addition to the administrative boundary was discovered. I'll note here that this request included modifying the council restriction on the corrected parkland. So when Metropolitan Council funds are used and an agreement and restrictive covenant is recorded on the purchased property that provides a higher level of protection to ensure regional recreation open space use in perpetuity. But this is a very small modification to the restriction. The middle example shows a possible boundary adjustment candidate. This land exchange removed 0.3 acres of the Mississippi River Regional Trail corridor land valued at $36,900 and added 0.3 acres of parkland valued at $33,500 within the Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park. A council restriction was also on the removal and addition parkland in this request as well. And third, a natural area or utility easements, and this is the image to your right. Washington County granted the Watershed District a 3.4 acre easement to protect a lake. The subject land in this request allowed the project to take place while maintaining a recorded council agreement and restrictive covenant on the property. So here is the process for the amendments before you. Of note is the time savings of the proposed administrative process, which is estimated at 15 business days. This includes contacting the council, a council staff administrative process determination. The next step is working together with council and agency staff to determine the submittal contents, which would be abbreviated and customized to the request. And then next step would be the agency submittal, and finally, the administrative review and approval. The proposed minor amendment and the full amendment goes through the council's full committee process, which is about 60 days. And then the policy plan update takes about 4 months because it includes a public hearing. So I just wanted to go through the advice that we heard from the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Committee from their October meeting. The MPOS had a really robust conversation about the administrative process for these amendments and came to the conclusion that the $100,000 threshold for the land removal and additions, for land removal and additions or boundary adjustments was too low. They landed on deciding that they would like something that is rounded in one number, so that it could be more accurately, reflect market rate cost and land within the metro. And they had said to consider using an average cost of the 5 acres within the MUSA, which would be approximately $1 million. And then also another comment that boundary adjustments for land with council or state funding restrictions should not be candidates for the administrative amendment process. So Emmett, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Tracy. Now we're at the point where, so we want to hear back what your thoughts and questions are on this, and then Tracy and I will go into the laboratory and write a proposal with policy language that will reflect what we just went through. But we do want to hear your questions and suggestions for this. Thanks.
Well, thanks. Oh, yeah. We have some, I was going to ask just a quick question back on slide 6 when you were talking about the process range. And you have the proposed amendment, the 15 business days. So absent this proposal, would everything be 60 days then? Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, can you show your hand? I know
Yeah, but that was the question.
Oh, okay. All right.
It is to save time, and so what was the impact was the question. One more, though. Does this all start at impasse? I'm wondering what that upfront process is. Who's making the determination of, what is minor? I know it's described, but, who makes the determination of what falls in here? Where is that agreed to?
Ms. Kinney.
Chair, Commissioners, Council members, sorry. It's a good question. Staff would be doing a determination based on the criteria that council approves. And then requesting both the parks manager and then the committee development director or her designee to approve that.
Okay. And is there a listing, a summary, a review of what amendments or what changes are happening over time that comes to the council or comes somewhere?
Chair, council members, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most definitely. Yeah. I'm sure Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Committee would be really interested in that, and that's a really good suggestion. Thank you so much.
Director Barajas would like to follow up.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to comp plan amendments that we review administratively, we report out on those trends on an annual basis on what we're seeing. We get volumes more comp plan amendments than parks plan amendments, but certainly we could add that to our annual process as well.
Thank you. And then I have in Q&A, hope I have everyone, council members Wolf, Chambliss, then Lindstrom. Oh, and Vento, cool.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On your trail alignment amendments, is there any length restriction other than the start and ending point? Because, if you had a 10-mile trail where everything in the middle changed, that would not be minor. So maybe having, a percentage or a distance or something would be a good idea.
Did you want to respond?
Chair, council members, that's a good suggestion. Thank you so much.
Cool. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, so I'm glad you brought that up. My question is related to the MPOSC advice. It makes sense to me to increase it from $100,000 if it's not enough to really make a change, so I'm okay with that. But in terms of land, only land that, boundary adjustments for land with council or state funding restrictions should not be candidates for this amendment process, but, I mean, how much land has restrictions on it, and what kind of restrictions are they talking about? I think that might be a bit too vague.
Thank you. And I was going to make that same point, Councilmember Chambliss said, and I feel like I need more context around that number. I mean, if it's not $100,000, yeah, what is it? Thanks. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. I was going to make the trail comment as well. And I thought, in addition, it would be helpful to put in some sort of caveat language about if this proposed change is of sufficient public interest, that it come before, that it go through the normal process.
Thank you. Councilmember Vento, then Councilmember Wolf.
I want to second thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to second everything that's been said here, and I also want to note that as far as the impasse process, it was very robust. It was a really good, thorough discussion, and there was a park staff person at the meeting, and he even participated to some extent in the conversation. So it was a good discussion, and I think that impasse will be fully supportive of the kinds of things that you're suggesting here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you for that insight. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question for Councilmember Lindstrom. Are you meaning if it's controversial?
Yeah, even if it's just, like, and trails are on my mind for some reason, right?
You're being very careful.
Yeah, I know. Even if
it,
even if that trail zigs or zags just a block, that it not just go through the administrative process.
Thank you.
Mr. Mullin.
I was just going to say, that's how I understood your comment.
Okay, good.
Controversial
We're
ones
on the same wavelength.
reach a level of public interest, don't put it on the administrative amendment
Right on.
road. Okay. Trail, excuse me. So,
Ms. Kinney, Mr. Mullin, are you getting what you need from the committee tonight? Yep. Good.
this was excellent. We will come back with a more specific proposal with policy language and whatnot. I always hesitate, but I was thinking of a regional trail that I can't remember the name of, but it's in Scott County, and it goes through Murphy-Hanrahan Park Reserve. And they have a really interesting proposal that they need to do a lot more detail on. But in the plan, it said, this trail may be 3 miles or it may be 6 miles as it goes through the Murphy-Hanrahan Park Reserve. And I'm like, whoa, that's quite a variation. But I think that they're interested in really creating, a beautiful trail that goes through a lot, but they also want to make sure that they don't hurt or they want to align it in a good way. So we'll suggest that they come back with that more detailed proposal, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, that was great.
Good. Councilmember Vento.
Just want to say that you both exceeded my hopes as far as length. This was a great presentation, and it was done in such a way that we didn't have to add on a lot of length, so thank you.
Thank you.
It's too nice and even.
Thank you very much. Thanks. We look forward to the policy language coming forward. Committee members, anything else? Director Barajas, Michelle? All right. Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.